Dr. Heilige Mishnah. Today is the yahrzeit of Rav Mendel Kaplan Zatzal. He was my Rebbe, and he was nifter when he taught our year. He was nifter, so he used to always have good quips to say. So since we're talking about Edom Zoyman, he didn't like speaking English, but what he often did was he spelled English words. We would tell us that Zoyman is a Bumering. It's a boomerang. That's what he used to tell us. Those are the Edom Zoyman. That was Zuchus Yovim Aleinu Kol Yisrael. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Chanan. We were once learning Kovetz Shurim. He was speaking at a Kovetz Shurim, and the Kovetz Shurim writes that one of my Talmidim, a Talmud Vosik said Azoy and Azoy. So remember, says if they say those are given mich. Was his svara. Okay, gewaltig. Today's also the yahrzeit, I think, of the Beis Yosef. I think it's the Beis Yosef's yahrzeit. And if I'm not mistaken, it's also the yahrzeit of Tzemach Tzedek, and it's also the yahrzeit of the Alshach Kodesh. So it's a very holy day. Sounds like it's a good day to die, but there's never a good day to die. The best time to die is next year. We should all be zoichet to 120 with Gezint, with Panusa Berebe, with Yiddish Nachas, and with all the brachas. Zot Heilige Mishnah, Me'idim Onu es ish ploini shegir sesishtoi. Yankel was Megarish's wife. Veloy nosan laksubasa, he has not yet paid off ksuba. So basically, they're giving him a liability. They're creating a liability for him to pay off her ksuba. Let's say, for argument's sakes, the value of her ksuba is $100,000. So they are now forcing him to pay her $100,000. Now they're not really being mopsed at him $100,000 because it's very likely that he would have to pay that eventually anyway. So we cannot say that what they tried to make him lose was $100,000 because, as a matter of fact, maybe he would have given her the money anyway, right? If he would have given her the money anyway, then all they did was make him give it to her earlier. So therefore, we have to figure out what the value of him paying it now versus maybe paying it later. We have to look at that value and figure out how to assess it. So what we do is, but if she becomes an almana or she becomes a migureshes, she'll get her full $100,000. But if she dies before her husband, she gets zero. So if she wanted to sell her ksuba, basically selling an option, right? And she says, if I end up getting divorced, I'm going to be paid $100,000. If my husband dies, I'm going to get paid $100,000. But if I die first, I'm not getting a penny. How much would you be willing to pay for that? So we're going to see very shortly that a person would be willing to pay for, let's say, for example, 40 cents on the dollar. So the value that she could receive if she wanted to sell her rights to her ksuba would be $40,000. Now, of course, you're not going to make the husband pay the Edom pay the husband $40,000 because that's what the value of her end of the bargain is. His end of the bargain is not worth that amount. So the first shot in the Gemara will be is that the ksuba in total is worth $100,000. Her chelik of it even now is worth $40,000. That means what's remaining on him is $60,000. So therefore, they have to pay the Baal $60,000. That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. That's the other sheet of the Gemara. The other sheet of the Gemara will be no. You have to analyze what his value is, not just take her value and subtract it from the total. That's exactly the discussion that the Gemara is going to have. So Zok the Gemara, Ketat Shaman. So how do you make this assessment as to what the value of that ksuba is? Amar B'chista Beval. You don't do what I just described in the Mishnah. You look at the value directly of the husband's chelik, and we're going to see Rashi, who explains very clearly what that is. I'll speak it out before, and then we'll see Rashi inside. It's Beval. Now, if it's Beval, we're going to have a problem because if you look at the Lashon HaMishnah, the Lashon HaMishnah seems very stark to indicate you look at the value of hers and then you subtract it. So we're going to have two challenges. A, what is this assessment of Beval? And B is how is this sheet out of Reb Chisda going to understand the word of the Mishnah? So the way Reb Chisda learns is, there's a field, for instance, there's a property that's designated to pay the ksuba. It's a property worth $1,000. The husband also has rights to use her nichs and look. How much would people pay me for my rights? Would I pay $100,000 for that property that's worth $100,000? No, I might lose it. I might lose it. For instance, if he divorces his wife or if he dies first, I'll have to give it all to her. So what would I be willing to pay? That, let's say, would be 50 cents on the dollar. That would be more value. You know why? Because right now he has it. Right now he has it. So cash in the hand is always more valuable. She is only selling a potential. A potential may be worth 40 cents on the dollar. But surely what he has is worth 50 cents on the dollar, maybe more. But it's definitely worth more than her share. So therefore, the damages would be higher, and the Eidim Zayman would have to pay what he could have received for selling his interest in those properties. Okay, so Dr. Gemara, it's the Isha, which is the calculation we just made. You see what her value is worth, and you subtract that from the total. Now, there's more than just the $100,000 payment that she's receiving if she should be divorced. That field of $100,000, she's getting all the nichs and look back. Who knows how many millions of dollars worth of fields she might have brought into the marriage, right? So Zok Papa, you don't calculate that. Why don't you calculate that? Because the Eidim Zayman could say, listen, we know there was a ksuba for 100,000, but we had no clue about all the different nechassim that she brought in. So we surely didn't intend to make him lose that because we didn't even know what it was. It was undefined. Now let's see Rashi. It's a long Rashi, but it's a simple Rashi. Ketat Shaman, Zok Rashi. What exactly are we being mechayiv the Eidim Zayman to pay? The yesh lift our Mishnah saying the lishnei tzaddim. You can explain our Mishnah in two different ways. Ketzat hareish leish uleisha schus safek v'ksivuzu. They each have interest. Either the husband, either the wife have an interest in this ksuba. He mitzapa, she's looking forward. Shem yamus oyigar shena, if he dies or divorces her, tigva as kula. She will get the full 100,000 plus all the nichs and the look involved. But who mitzapa, and him on the other hand, I don't think it means he's literally looking forward to it. It means that's what his option would be. V'umitzapa shem tamus b'chayov, if she dies in his lifetime, yira shena, he will yashim her. Now, yov v'koich schusoi mikoich schusa. For sure, his chus is more valuable than hers. Why? Because he has cash. Shu oichel peres akarka. Right now, he is getting the benefits of all those properties. That's number one. It's in his hand. And she doesn't. She has no access to it right now. Therefore, if they each wanted to sell to a third party the option of whatever their interest in this property is, his portion is more valuable because of the reasons that Rashi outlined. The Lishna of Asnisin mashma, the Lishna of the Mishnah is more mashma. Sheshaman schus sveika. We actually assess the value of her suffering. The katani, because those are the words of the Mishnah. Kama adam roitalita and she'im nisaimala. How much is someone willing to pay for her risk? You can't say no one's going to suggest that the Zayimim are going to pay the Baal the value of what her option is worth. They never came to be mafsid the husband, her suffik, rather his interest in it. Because they were forcing him to pay right now. Therefore we'll say, Shaman schus sveika kama adam right to lita and b'tayvus anos shalom. But also lo yisham. That's the part that don't pay to the Baal. Rather, you subtract that from the total of 100,000. So in our case, you subtract 40,000 from the total of 100,000. The chol hashar yishalmu, and the remainder, the $60,000, are what the Eidei Zayim have to pay. Shekol hashar hoyim mafsidin noisem bedusam, because all the remaining is what they were being mafsid, the husband. Avol oisen domim loy hoyim mafsidin noisem, but the value of her chelik, that part, they were not mafsid her because she has that now already. Sharei gamata kishahuzmu, right now that her huzam, she still could sell that schus. So that schus remains with her. Just like she could sell it in the open market, her husband would be willing to give that to her right now. So kum techois, he's only losing $60,000. That's one option. Or Mati's option. We have to find a way to assess the value of what he has in this deal. And those specific amount is what the Edom pay. We don't make him give, we don't make the Edom pay $60,000, which is the full value of the ksuba, less her toivas hana. Who said the damages are 60,000? Maybe the damages are less. Even now that they're zoymimin, so he doesn't have to pay her now. He might die tomorrow. And therefore she will get everything. She will not sell it to him. You know what they have to pay him? They have to pay him his value in this option at this point, which is worth, let's say, $50,000. If they were not muzam, what would have happened? He would pay right now if their marriage were to dissolve. Now he has a schus sofek where he might be able to keep this property forever. Now, based on that, how do you understand what the Mishnah says, Shemnis Amala, which clearly seems to indicate that we're looking at the value of her side of this bargain? We assess how much somebody would be willing to pay for this ksuba. She tluya besofik. The ksuba is totally in a sofik. What is that sofik? So we're not saying that's the value that we're assessing. We're just saying that this ksuba is a sofik because there could be things that will occur that will either make him have to pay out or make him not pay out. And therefore, but to directly assess his interest in it, that's what they pay. So the bottom line is, if you go with being shaman schus ha'isha, the Eidei Zayim will have to pay him more, like 60,000. But if you directly assess his schus, it's only worth 50,000, and therefore the Eidom's exposure will be less. Okay. Rab Nasan Amar Be'isha, Schus Veika Imdin, Voice Lo Yishalmu, V'chaymer Gadol, He Etlan, that's a big chomer because the Eidim are going to end up paying more. And Rav Papa added to Be'isha, Shaman Rav Nasan Uviksubasa. He says Uviksubasa. No, it's Lo Yishalmu Loi, Elaha Oidif Biksubasa Aladav Malo. They only take the kesef ksuba that he was going to pay her in the event that the marriage dissolves. Avoloi nichsim elug shala, we don't consider the value of her nichsim elug in this equation, even though whatever they're doing to the ksuba money, they're also doing with the nichsim elug, because if she gets paid the ksuba money, she will also get back all of the properties that are nichsim elug. So there's a greater value here. Nevertheless, that's not part of the equation. What we're being mechayiv the edim. They are impacting that as well. Nevertheless, in Mishalman, why? The Edim can claim we had no idea that they were properties that she brought into the marriage, and therefore we're not going to pay that. I didn't hear it this way. Kakshmati Rashi means a different shot, which we will not get into right now. Zok to Gemara weiter. Zok to Heilige Gemara weiter. Me'iden anu bish ploni shu chayiv l'chaveroi 1,000 zuz almanas litnan loy mekan vat shloshim. They said that there's a loan of 1,000 zuz, and the 1,000 zuz is due in 30 days. He says, yes, I owe 1,000 zuz, but it's Mikan V'Esh Hashanah. I have my deal was that I have to pay back in 10 years. So basically, it's the cost of money, it's the cost of borrowing for 10 years, less 30 days, is what he's losing. Depending on the interest rates, that would determine what the value of that is. So how much would somebody pay so that he can borrow money for that period of time? So it's very simple. It's the interest. So it's a pretty simple calculation. You just take the interest rates, and whatever interest he would have paid is the value that the Eidim are being mafsidim. If you lend somebody money for 10 years, nevertheless, Shemitah is in between the time that you borrowed and the time that you're supposed to pay back, and therefore, Shvius Misham Tasei. Therefore, you won't ever have to pay back. Why would you ever have to pay back? Because Shemitah comes. So the Gemara is going to ask in a moment, well, if that's the case, why do I just pay interest? The fact of the matter is, we should be mechayiv the agent to pay me the whole chayiv, because I wouldn't have had to pay back. And now they're being mechayiv me to pay back. I freak the Gemara, Afal Gab, even though the hashta loy karina be loy yigosh, because what the pasuk says is that you're not allowed to collect a chayiv on Shemitah, and that's why the chayiv becomes mishameh. However, if there's a contract that says I only pay back in 10 years, so Shemitah will not be mishamet, because this is the type of chayiv that there's nothing to collect. They can't collect before the 10 years because it doesn't become due. So therefore, maybe Shemitah should not have an impact on such a chayiv. Doesn't matter, because soif asi l'dei lo yivosh. At the end of the day, it's going to come to a collection. Okay. But Rav Kahana has a kasha on the shita, because Rav Kahana says, "Oimdim kama odem roitza lite." Our Mishnah says, "Kama odem roitza lite v'yu elef zuz biyadoi ben lite mikan vad lamajoim uben lite mikan v'res hashon." If you hold that after 10 years, you won't have to pay back at all, then kuli nami they would have to pay him the full value of the chayv, because based on what they're saying, that it comes due in 30 days, he's mukhif to pay. But based on what his arrangement, or what he claims his arrangement is, he'll never have to pay back. We know there are certain scenarios where shviz is not mishamed. For instance, the milval mashkin. If there's a mashkin there, it's not called a yigosh, because you're paid already. He has to come and redeem the mashkin. The malva has to come and redeem the mashkin from you. Or b'moiser shtarois of lebestin. What is the definition of moiser shtarois of lebestin? So Rashi, who prusbul shehiskin hillel. What does that mean? Shekasav boy, we write a star to Bezin that says Moshreni lechem ploini adayonim shebabakim ploini shekol chayv sheishli sheegvenu kol zman she'ertza. Let me ask you a question. You've written prusbuls before. Did you ever borrow money and someone gave you an IOU note? I mean, we're not in the position to lend out the amount of money that you would demand an IOU note. But did you notice that you gave your IOU note to Bezin? No. You write a new document that says Bezin's taking over my chayvus. But you're not actually handing over the stores to Bezin, right? So let's look at Toysus. The most stories for the Bezin appears at countries the Hainu Prusbul. V'lo I disagree, it's not Prusbul. Dava Masechah Shviyas Tani, HaMoiser Storos of Lebezdin, V'hadakatani Prusbul. So it lists off Moiser Storos of Lebezdin as a second option other than Prusbul. So obviously it can't mean the same thing. In the Meshamet, Alma Trey Milin Kach Nira, the Trey Milin Moiser Storos of Lebezdin Midaraisa in the Meshamet. It's not a Takon of Hillel. If you actually physically give over your stars to Bezin, it's talking about Meshamet, even Midaraisa. That's what we're referring to over here. Okay? Zokting more weiter. Ikadami, or we could say another pshat. Amar Bidor Shmuel, Hamalvas Chaveri Les Hashanim, ain't Shvis Misham Tosai. Now we don't have the kasha of our mission anymore. Eventually you're going to, the Malva will mond this life. It doesn't matter. During the Shemitah year, before the loan is due, there's no issue of lo yigosh, because this is not a chayiv that would even grant the Malva the right to come collect. So we have a machlokes if you have a time limit on the loan when it's due, and it's not due until after the Shemitah year, whether or not Shvius will be Mishabit. Amar Rav Kana, Afana Nami Tanina. We also learned a brisa that says, Oimdin, our Mishnah says, Kama Adam Right Litain, Viyu Elef Zuz Biyadoi, Bein Litain Mikan Vad Lamajoim, Uvein Litain Mikan Vad Eseshanim. So this is the same raya that was asked as a kasha on the tzad that Shvius is Mishamit, and now it's being brought as a raya. The armored Shvius Misham Tasoi, Kulu Nami Boy Shlumalai, Amarava, you don't have a raya. This is the same svar with which we slugged up the kasha a moment ago. Or ubemoister shtoros of lebezin. Titnan amal valamashkin, amoister shtoros of lebezin ain't mashmitin. Gewaltig. V'amar Rabbi Domer Shmuel. Ha'omer lechaveiroi almanas shaloi tishmateni shvius. I'm lending you money. Almanas that shvius will not be mishamet techoy. The lach is shvius mishametes. Of course, shvius is mishamet. I can't make up rules. The Torah says that the loan is bottle. It's mishamet, and I'm saying I want to change the rules of the Torah. You can't change it. So Zaktimar Lema Kazavar Shmuel Masna Masha Kasav B'Torah, who saying that Shvi shouldn't be mishamet is trying to change the halach of the Torah. V'chol Masna Al Masha Kasav B'Torah to no bottle. Frag the Gemara. Why do I need Shmuel to tell me this chiddush? Well, Itmar, we already learned it. I'm selling you a device, an item, and I might be overcharging you, and I'm saying I'm selling it to you almanas that even if I'm overcharging you, it shouldn't have the halachas of Eino. I don't want to have any rules. I want to flout all the rules of the Torah. So Rav Omer yesh lo alav Eino, but Shmuel Omer ein lo alav Eino. So I was wrong. I said the kashas, we already know it. The kashas Shmuel says differently. Shmuel says when it comes to me making a Tanai that I want to be able to ignore the rules of Eino, that Tanai works. So why doesn't my Tanai work when I want to ignore the rules of Shemitah? So there was already explanation and context given to the Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. And Amar Rav Anan Eladi Mafar Shalimei Shmuel. Let me explain to you exactly what Shmuel is talking about. If he said Almanas she'ein loch an olai oina'ah, if he said Almanas she'ein loch olai oina'ah, meaning I'm not changing the words of the Torah. I'm asking you in advance to be moichel. No matter how much I charge you, even if it turns out that legally it's oina'ah, I want you to be moichel. Almanas she'ein loch olai oina'ah. Then ein loy olav oina'ah. That Tanai is a Tanai I could make. But if I say Almanas she'ein boy oina'ah, but if I said almanas that there's no Eino here, meaning it's like a guarantee, I promise you that I'm not overcharging you. Harei yesh boy Eino. In fact, I can't change the Metzias. It was Eino. Hakanami. So too, when we apply these two different nuanced statements to Shemitah, almanas shaloi tishmeteni b'shvius, ein shvius misham tosai. If I say not almanas that shvius shouldn't have an impact. I can't change the Torah. I'm saying almanas shelo tishmeteni b'shvius. What I'm saying is you, as the loiva, have to be mekabel upon yourself to pay me, even though there's a shvius. That's the Tanai I'm making with you. That shvius will not be mishamet. There, the Tanai will work. But almanas shelo tishmeteni shvius. But if I say almanas that shemitah shouldn't impact this loan, and I want to change the words of the Torah, Shavish Mishem Tosei. The only little nuance here that's a little bit difficult to understand is the Gemara is trying to say that the two options there are similar to the two options here. But if you really look at it closely, it's not really parallel. Let's look at the two cases of Eino. Almanash ein loch ala Eino means you're being mochel Eino, right? That works. Almanash ein Eino means I'm guaranteeing that there is no Eino. And if there is, right? That's not the two cases that we're comparing to Shemitah. Shalat Shmitani b'Shvius is similar to Almanash ein loch ala Eino. Agreed. You're moichel Eino. You're moichel the Shemitah, right? But the second case, Almanash shalat Shmitani Shvius, that's not similar to the case of Almanash ein Eino. Almanash ein Eino is a guarantee that I'm not overcharging you. Almanash shalat Shmitani Shvius is saying I want to change the words of the Torah. So why is the Gemara saying it's a parallel case? The Gemara should have said hachanami. The Gemara said over here we can say it's referring to these two things, but the hachanami is mashma that it's a similar arrangement. No, ein loch alai I know means I want you to be mochel. So that's the one that's easy. The other half meaning I'm promising you that I didn't overcharge you. That's how the Rashi says it. She'ein b'ayno, Rashi says, she'ein b'ayno. Let's see, have a look at Rashi inside. Amanash she'ein b'ayno is no. Rashi says Amanash she'ein b'ayno ein ze masna she'yimcha lo ayno asay elo hu hisni imoy she'ein ayneyu b'mechazah. It's a guarantee. It's a guarantee. I'm telling you, I'm not being on you. I'm telling you, I'm charging you a fair price. But there is a no here. That what?
There's no such thing as
That wouldn't work.
Right.
Oh, and the tag doesn't work. I don't know, but Rashi didn't say that. So Tosfos actually asked this kasha. So let's have a quick look at Tosfos. Almanach ein boyano haray yesh boyano. Pircha kodris almanas kloimer ani maftichacha me'ayno she'ein boy. The Tosfos is very clear in what Rashi's intention is. Haray yesh boyano. The havi mekach tos. It's a mekach shekichas. He clearly lied. V'loinir doctors. I don't like Rashi's pshat. The heichem edama hachanami almanas loy tishmeteni shvius meshametes v'hosam loy shayich time the mekach tos. When it comes to the Shemitah issue, it's not a question of Mekach Tos. It's saying that I want to flout the words of the Torah. Well, he had a different shot. Amanasha ein bayino mashma shelo yochel iser lav deloy soinu ala mekach. It doesn't mean, which is how you learned. Tosfos learns exactly like how you learned. V'al korcha chuchal. Of course it's chal. She'ein yochel levatel me'oisai no. You can't be mevatel the halacha of know that the Torah states. And almanash in loch know is a t'nai with you directly. Koloimer shaloi titpali ha'ino. Even though yes, there's a din I know, but you're committing not to mon it from me elatim chayli. So there t'noi kaim. V'hachanami almanash shaloi tishamet shvius. Koloimer shaloi yachal isha shvius. Im ekach memcha. That doesn't work. In this way, they're equal. So Mati asked, why did Rashi push her? I don't know, but that's what the Rishbam said, exactly how you understood. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. Torah. Hamalvas chaver istam. What if you lend somebody money and you don't specify how much time he has to pay you back? The halach is eini rishayla toivoi pachas melamajoy. You have to let him keep the loan at least 30 days. Sover Rabbi Bar Chana kamei de Rav Lememar. Hanimili b'milva b'shtar. Do you know what type of loan has a minimum of 30 days? If it was milva b'shtar. The loyaved inish, the tarach, the cost of star, b'tzim metalson yomin. Usually the loyva has to write the star. He's not going to make himself meshiga to invest money in a sofer to write a star if he's not going to be able to keep the money for at least 30 days. Aval milva al peh, but if it's a milva al peh, loy, it's possible that it's even less than 30 days. Amalei Rav. This is what my uncle he used to refer to Reb Chia as Chavivi, my beloved. Rashi Targum Shal Doidi, my uncle. Oh, it doesn't mean beloved. It actually means uncle in Aramaic. Reb Chia Achei Avav. It was his uncle. Okay. Regardless, there's a minimum of 30-day time period to pay back. Tanya Namhachi, Amal B'Schaver Stam, Einu Rishol Toivoy, Pachus B'Shloshim Yoim, Echor Amal B'Shtar, Bechor Amal B'Peh. Perfect. Amal Shmuel Rav Masna. Loitesiv Akarech. I don't want you to relax. Adam Mefarshis Law Lahashmaitza until you explain to me the following halacha that I'm going to quote. Mino Milsa. How do we know the Yomer Abanon Amal B'Schaver Stam, Einu Rishol Toivoy, Pachus B'Lamajoyim? Echor Amal B'Shtar, Bechor Amal B'Peh. Where does it come from? Where does it come from? This 30-day period. Omelei, Dichsiv, it says in the pasuk, Karva Shnas Hasheva Shnas Hashmita. Right, the pasuk is talking about that a person says the Shemitah year is coming. I don't want to lend money because I might not ever get it back. So Mimashru Shenemar Karva Shnas Hasheva. Any day Shnas Shmita. the Gemara is asking that the pasuk is a little bit redundant. It could have said one or the other. Ella matam loimer. So the Torah is trying to be meramis something to us. That shnas hashmita loimer lach yesh shmita acheres sheikazu. There's two types of shmitas. There's the standard shmita that every seventh year absolves people of their chiyuv to pay back. But the other shmita is ve'ezoi zu hamalva eschavei stam shein reshay l'toivoi b'pachos b'shloshim yom. There's another shmita. Another shmita means there's another period of time where you're not allowed to collect chayvus, and that is within 30 days of the loan. Why is it 30 days? Yes, there's another shmita, but how do you know that the other shmita is 30 days? How do you get 30 days? Sometimes 30 days is considered a year, lagabi counting certain things. So therefore, the word shana can be used to describe the minimum period that counts for a year, and that will be 30 days. Rashi speaks out. Sometimes you find Yom Echad b'shana chasam shana, but the Gemara learns here 30 days. You have a beged that's not complete. What's missing? The place for the hole for your head to go through. So if you cut that open, now it's a beged because you could put it on. Chayev chatos shall be chayev chatos. And Rashi says, why are you chayev chatos? She'asa peh lachaluk chadosh. He made an opening. Chayev shetiken kli. He was misaken a keli. What in the world is this Hilchos Shabbos discussion doing in the middle of Makos? Mishum the Amar Rabbi Yehuda le'il hamalvus chaver le'eser shanim. V'oisei Rav Kana. Rabbi Yehuda said Allah and Rav Kana commented on it. So now we're discussing all of these items. Right? It's very similar. If you ever bought a product on Amazon, it always says other products from this vendor, right? So where do you think Jeff Bezos got it from? It all comes from the Gemara. When you introduce something, you like something, you have a relationship, let's talk more about what this relationship brought up. So Zog to Gemara, Maskif law Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana asked the kasha on Rav Yehuda. The halacha is if you chop off and you open up the tar, whatever putty it is that they use to close a barrel, and you cut it off so that you could now get the wine out of, that's not a chiyuv chametz. Amalei, so Rabbi Yehuda answered, zeh chiber v'zeh einei chiber. The megufa on the chavis is not part of the chavis. It's an add-on. It's not what we call connected. So you're not creating a pesach. It was always there. You're opening it up. By shaking by the beged, you are creating something brand spanking new. Let's see Rashi. The mat is rosh b'Shabbos. You could chop off the top, beside with a knife, to open it up. Why isn't that considered tikun kli? Why isn't that a chiyuv chados? Zed beis hatzaver haYechibur. It was connected. It was closed. Hilchach Pesach tikun chadosh uzeh. Cutting open the hole for your head is a brand new tikun. Aval megufa aval b'shatucha al pi chavis petit. Even though the stopper on the barrel is connected with tit, so it's like glued together. Ein zechibur. We don't consider that mamash mechuber, and when you open it up, we don't consider it like you made a new Pesach. V'avla kepsucha v'oimedes. Gewaltig. Zog to Gemara weiter. V'amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Shloisha shlugen mayim. So the halacha is, if you have a mikvah with 40 saw in it, no matter how much water of she'uvim that you add to it, it won't be a problem. And that's how our mikvah works. We give a bar that has 40 lugan of rainwater, and then the way you fill it up is you add water to that bar, she'uvim, and it overflows into the mikvah. So once you have 40 saw, you're protected. But if you have less than 40 saw, and you add 3 lugan of mayim shuvim into it, that mikvah is now puzzle, and you have to drain the mikvah. That's why whenever they drain the boyers, they have to make sure that the boyer is so perfectly dry, there's not one drop of moisture in it before they allow the rainwater in, because we're afraid that it might approach shloisha lugan, and then no matter how much rainwater you put in, it won't be kosher. So what happens if 3 lugan of water fell into a bar that has less than 40 saw? And what happened was the 3 lugan of water had in it added shenaf al l'soichon kurtov shel yayin. So now you have 3 lugan plus a kurtov of total volume. 3 lugan is water, and then now if yayin falls into a bar, it will not pass it. Water will pass a bar, but not yayin. Now you have 3 lugan of water that has yayin in it, Umarein kimarayayin. But the whole water now is red. So we treat this like wine, or do we treat this like water? So v'naflu mikvah loy paslu wouldn't pass. So what do you see from here? That Mara makes a big difference. Since, even though it is water, but since it looks like wine, halachically, it takes on the properties of wine, and it will not pass on the mikvah, even though there's 3 lugan or more. Maskav lo Rav Kahana asked the kasha. V'chima bein zeh l'meitzeva. What's the difference between colored water and this? This is really just colored water. The Tanya Rabbi Yosy Omer, meitzeva paisal is a mikvah, b'shloishes lugan. Meitzeva would pass on the mikvah. Amalei Rava, pasam mayid tzeva mikvah. Colored water is called just that, colored water. And therefore it's water, therefore it will pass on the mikvah. But hacha, chamra mazika mikri. People are not going to call that colored water. They're going to call it diluted wine. So since it's considered to be wine, it will not pass on the mikvah. But Tani Rab Chia said, Haridu is a mikvah. Rab Chia holds that this 3 lugan of water with wine in it would pass on the mikvah. So Rab Chia is clearly arguing on Rav. Rav Alakasha, you're right, he is arguing on Rav. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Rabbanan. We actually have a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri and the Rabbanan as to whether or not water with the coloring of wine, does that have a status of water, and therefore it'll pass on the mikvah, which is what Rabbi Chia holds, or does it have a status of wine, and it will not pass on the mikvah, and that's what Rav holds. The Tanan we learned, Shloishes lugan mayim, chaser kurtiv. Now, Rav, till now, was talking about 3 lugan of water complete, not missing a kurtiv. And now we're talking about a slightly different case. It's 3 lugan of water, chaser kurtiv, meaning if the water would have fell into the mikvah as is, it would not have passed on the mikvah. There's not 3 lugan. Shenafal l'soichan kurtiv yayin. Now it's a total of 3 lugan, but it's not pure 3 lugan of water because there's a kurtiv of wine involved. Umarein kemari yayin, and it looks red like wine. V'naflu l'mikvah, and it fell into the mikvah. Loy paslu, it wouldn't pass. So Rashi says right away, according to Rav, even if it wasn't chaser kurtiv, it wouldn't pass. So from here you see that this shita argues on Rav, because this shita says, you know why it didn't pass only because you don't have 3 full lugan of water. But had you had 3 full lugan of water, even though it looks like wine, it will be possible. This is the brisa that will hold like Rabbi Chia, not like Rav. V'cheinu gimel lugan mayim chaser kurtiv, shenafel asaychen kurtiv chalav, umarein kimar mayim, v'nafel migloi paslu. Why? Because you don't have 3 full lugan of water. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Omer hakoil hoylech achar hamara. If it's red, it will not pass, even if it's more than 3 lugan, which is exactly what we quoted from Rav. But Frek Gemara, you understood this last little machlokes that we quoted from this brisa between Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri and the Rabbanon. That you learned it as a sofik. You learned it as a vadai. This is pshat in this machlokes, but that's not so simple. There's a boy le Rav Papa. Rav Papa wasn't sure to understand this brisa the way we just explained it. The boy Rav Papa, Rav Tani Chaser Kurtav Bereisha. Now our nusach is Chaser Kurtav, and that's why we were able to be medayik that if it was full 3 lugan of water, even if it looked like wine, it would pass it. Right? That's what we dash. But that's not necessarily how you read this brisa, because Rav Papa had a shaila. Rav Tani Chaser Kurtav Bereisha. Which is exactly how we learned it. And even if there's 3 lugan of water, the fact that it looks like wine says it doesn't passel, which is the shita of Rav. And therefore we'll have to learn that Rav cannot agree with the Tanakama of this brisa. Rav will agree with Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Or maybe our girsa of the brisa is wrong. Or maybe Dilma Rav Loitani Chaser Kurta Bereisha. Maybe the brisa that we just quoted at the top of our Amud shouldn't say Chaser Kurta. It should mean 3 full lugan of water, and if it looks like yayin, it won't passel, right? Or Dilma Rav Loitani Chaser Kurta Bereisha, which means now Rav will be consistent with the Tanakama, right? Because the Tanakama also agrees that even though there's a full 3 lugan of water, since it looks like wine, Mara counts, and therefore the mikveh will be kosher. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, so what is Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri arguing about? Ki polik aseifa the polik. He's only arguing on the seifa. What does it say in the seifa? That if it looks like water, if you have 3 lugan of water with milk mixed into it, and it looks like water, so the Mishnah says, loy paslu, it wouldn't passel, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri holds it will passel, because it looks like water. So what would the seifa be? The seifa would have to be chaser kurtov, which means the seifa is you have 3 lugan of water less of kurtov that's supplemented by a little bit of milk. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Bruni would hold, even though you don't have 3 full lugan of water, because some of it is milk, but since it all looks like water, it will still pass. And that's what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. Rabbi Yochanan kipolag aseifa the polo. Rav the Amr Kedivri Akol, and then Rav would be consistent, side with the Tanakama and side with Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Zok Gemara, true. Rav Papa Mabayle. Rav Papa does have this shaila, and he's not sure shot in the brisa. But guess what? L'Rava Pshitalei. Rava is sure that this is how you read a brisa with Chaser Kurtov, and therefore Rav will be consistent with Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, but he will not be consistent with the Tanakama. Okay, we're running late, so we'll have to stop here. The Gishmaka Gemara is that we have a certain level of familiarity. We're learning such foreign material for the past couple of weeks. Now we're back to like the standard Gemara stuff.
What's doing tomorrow?
Tomorrow is Shabbos, right? So tomorrow we learn an hour before Mincha. We learn 1 hour before Mincha. We're not going to learn Motzei Shabbos. So Motzei Yom Tov, I'm going to have to do 3 blat. Because Motzei Yom Tov or Motzei Shabbos, I usually review the blat that we learned on Shabbos and Yom Tov for those people who couldn't make it, and I also want to record it online. So Motzei Yom Tov, I'm going to have to do 3 blat. So we'll have to keep it very concise, Motzei Yom Tov. But most people come anyway on Yom Tov, so often I'm just recording, talking to myself, which is fine.